while, man, and it's always nice venturing outside of your comfort zone. How about yourself, brother?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, we can actually talk about that a little bit today. The differences between just kind of like Tendermint app chains, Cosmos app chains, and Arbitrum, these kinds of layer twos and rollups, and like what really is the key differentiator. And we can kind of go a little bit deeper into those topics if you would prefer, actually.
Yeah, for sure, man. I know you have quite a bit of experience in like the technical side of things. So, we can dive deep into that once we get.
Hey guys, my name is King Wabi from Because Bitcoin, and I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode from one of our many Twitter spaces. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for the week, Nodes Protocol, and they are a Web3 financial suite that offers an innovative approach to money markets with a novel lease solution to develop the DeFi space further. And the opportunities that this can have for users is that from the borrower standpoint, the individual can access loans that are under collateralized with financing up to 150%. And that fact, from the borrower's perspective, is that they would still have access to all of their funds. So be sure to follow Noah's protocol right under the description bar. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode.
My name is Wabi, and I want to give a shout out to Jin from the Saga team, Drew from the Saga team, and we're also joined by a few special guests on the speaker panel. Our very own Will's Outlook, and also AD, who's an absolute legend in my world. A pretty cool guy when it comes to these conversations in the broader crypto landscape. So I want to welcome AD to the show. And before we start, I want to give a shout out to today's Crypto World Radio sponsor, Noah's Protocol. And, their information is up on the Nest, and Noah's Protocol is a non-custodial lending app and also has unique features for borrowers. It offers loans that are under collateralized with financing up to 150% without the risk of liquidation through its DeFi lease solution. And I want to welcome you guys to today's interview with Saga. And, these guys have been here on the show before, as well as their CEO, Rebecca, who's a legend in my eyes. And Saga is a protocol that aims to revolutionize the Web3 experience through the creation of app-specific chains called chainlets, and they're built on top of the Cosmos SDK, and they really offer a high degree of flexibility for both the developers and the end users while allowing for the easy deployment of dedicated blockchains, which I find pretty cool. So in this interview, we're going to be discussing all things regarding the unique features from Saga now that they've launched their Cassiopeia testnet. I'm sorry if I butchered the word, brother, but yeah, we're gonna be going over things like their shared security, advanced validator orchestration, and also standardized deployment pipeline. And we're also going to explore how Saga's model differs from other chains and how it provides developers with unparalleled flexibility in choosing their preferred tech stack. So once again, we're joined by Jin, who's one of the co-founders, and also Drew, who I believe is part of their BND team and all that community stuff. So good to have him here, and congratulations on the baby once again, brother. It's good to have you guys. How are you guys feeling today?
Thanks for that incredible intro. We were doing great. I think, should I briefly talk about kind of what a quick introduction on what Saga is, and then we can kind of kick off from there?
Yeah. Feel free to do so, brother. It's good to have you on again, man. God bless you.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've been kind of refining some of our messaging points, and we've kind of identified a good flow to have to describe essentially what is wrong with Web3 development today. And so the fundamental thesis for Saga is that the developer journey in Web3 is kind of broken. So how is it broken? So if you take a look at broadly, there are two categories of deployment for developers to bring out their product into the market in Web3. One is go into this like layer one, layer two, kind of deploy on someone else's infrastructure. That's like one camp, and the second camp is something like app chains like Cosmos or Avalanche or things like that, where you get your own infrastructure ultimately. And you can kind of divide a developer's kind of journey with their customers into three broad categories. So there's the testing phase. Very early on, you don't have any users. And then there's the kind of the initial development phase where you've launched and you're live, but you have a very small amount of loyal customers. And then you get to the growth stage, which is where usually, ideally, your product kind of hits product market fit and you have this hockey stick growth that you get. And the idea here is that when you go and try to deploy your application onto a layer one or layer two, it's great when you're in the testing phase and you're in the kind of like the early phases. But as soon as you hit that growth aspect of it, life gets really difficult. Gas fees are expensive, user experiences are terrible. And a lot of the times they want to do customized things with their chains that they can't do at all. And so that's like on the layer one, layer two side of things. And then on the app chain world, it's great for when you're at that growth side of things because you have your own space. You can kind of design it the way that you want to, but getting started is terrible, right? So it takes about like 6 to 8 months for someone to launch their own chain. When you're trying to do like a very quick and easy test and get early adoptions and test things out, unless you can demonstrate value accrual to the validators and such, you can't really get a validator set, right? And so this is the fundamental issue in Web3 infrastructure today. And if it was super easy for someone to first launch in a layer one and then go to an app chain, this wouldn't be a problem. But the issue is that that also is really difficult. So if you take a look at two good examples, DYDX and Axie Infinity, two kind of people in different industries. DYDX, it's been about a year since they've announced that they're going to go to Cosmos. It's taking a little bit of time. Actually took about a year to get Ronin kind of out the door. Also had a lot of issues kind of launching through that. So that transition point is incredibly difficult for developers. And the big fundamental issue in Web3 today is that there isn't a singular platform that supports the developer journey from the very early on all the way to kind of the scaling stages. And what Saga is a solution that allows developers to kind of start and test things out. And as they ramp up, they kind of get elastic block space so that they can support the hockey stick growth that they would like to support without worrying about infrastructure failing. And so that's kind of the genesis of our project. And so what we've done is we've designed the entire developer flow such that each application or each kind of component in an application sits in its own application specific chain, except you don't have to worry about setting up validators and a staking token. We've kind of abstracted that away from everybody, so such that you can kind of launch a chain almost as easily as you deploy a smart contract on Ethereum. And once you have that, then you can kind of use the same services to launch your own chainlet, maybe one, maybe two chainlets in the beginning, and then as you get more and more traffic, you can kind of parallelize your application into multiple chainlets. And this is how we've designed the product and onboarding flow for developers.
That's sick, man. Thank you so much for that brief introduction. Once again, man, it's great to have you on here. And more recently, I know Rebecca has been talking about the Saga multiverse. So I'd like to know what exactly does that entail for the protocol?
Yeah, so the Saga multiverse is kind of a cross-disciplinary effort that we're pushing out. Where one thing we noticed is, so we have this thing called the Innovator Program, which is kind of like our ecosystem program. We onboard people who are interested in building on Saga into kind of like the Saga Innovator Program. And what we've noticed kind of organically happening is some of our innovators wanted to work with our other innovators and have collaborations in technology in other kinds of forms like art or music and things like that. So every game that launches on Saga will need some form of assets that are different from what their core competency are, and so things like sound design or music or art. And so what we can do is we can kind of turn our entire Saga ecosystem and innovator program into almost like a full decentralized production studio that allows all of our innovators to work together. And so that's kind of what the effort of the multiverse is. We have some other kind of technical implementations of that. So another way that the multiverse kind of manifests itself is that we can kind of work with various technology projects out there that and infrastructure projects that have not worked together previously. So an example is we've signed partnerships with Avalanche and Polygon and Celestia, and we will support Cosmos. So these are kind of four disparate and different technology ecosystems that can kind of converge onto Saga. So that in essence, making connections and working with people that you would normally not work together with in a ecosystem fashion, that's the essence of the multiverse.
Sick, man. And I'd like to touch upon the Saga realms. Could you explain the concept of a realm and also its three functional parts, including the realm technology and obligations?
Yeah, so this is the technical manifestation of what we call the multiverse. And so the idea here is traditionally, if you think about other infrastructure companies, they consider their kind of blockchain as their singular solution, and they get most kind of uh, developers onboarded on to a singular technology stack that they generally control, right? And what we've identified, at least with the Saga architecture, is that the architecture can be expanded, and essentially we can open up a lot of the technology stack that was traditionally not uh, able to be customizable, and introduce this concept called realms. And so a realm is composed of three things, as you mentioned. First is the technology stack. The second is obligations, and then third is what's called the security source. And we can kind of go through each of those aspects, and by modifying um, what those three things are, you can kind of create new realms that are much more tailored to specific developers' needs. So let me give me 1 second.
Yeah, not a
So
problem, brother.
oh no, I just had to cough. So on the technology front, it's kind of what I described earlier. We have a partnership with Polygon and Avalanche and Celestia, and so those are three different kind of app chain slash roll up models and technologies. But in Saga, because we facilitate the launching of app chains environments for developers, we can kind of support whatever technology the developer wants because of how modular our system is. And so the technology stack essentially specifies what kind of app chain or roll up you want. And so this is pretty analogous to, for example, when you go to AWS and request a server, let's say from or a compute cluster from AWS. You have the option of running Go code or um, Ruby code, or what kind of operating system generally, like Ubuntu or Debian or whatever. There's different flavors. And Amazon really doesn't care. They will support every single kind of technology stack that developers ultimately want to, because they're not really selling a specific technology. They're selling the space, right? The compute space. And so from our perspective, the technology stack of a realm allows developers to essentially get an option of what kind of technology that they want. So the consensus can change. So in the example, we can have Tendermint consensus with the Cosmos stack, but Avalanche consensus on an Avalanche subnet. And then you can also change, for example, the language that you're coding in. And so you can have a Tendermint stack with an EVM module sitting on top. That's one example. But you can also launch a Tendermint app chain with a CosmWasm module on top. Then you would get a different language. And so we were trying to open up essentially the technology space for the developers as much as possible and make it as flexible as possible and have that offering on Saga using this technology stacks with Realms. The second kind of requirement for a realm is what's called an obligation. And you can kind of think of this one as like, what is the behavior of that realm? And you can kind of modify that to get the behavior that you want. So let's say you launch, you want a chainlet that has a very strict SLA. And by SLA, we mean like validator uptime requirements. Then what you can do is you can create a realm that has the same technology stack. Let's say they're both Cosmos EVM based chains that you want to launch, but you can kind of have two different realms. One realm where the SLA requirement for one is kind of looser, so there's a chance that your chain might go down, but that might be okay for some people. So because of that, it's cheaper. In another realm, you could have the same technology stack, but it offers essentially a looser SLA. A stricter SLA, which means that it's guaranteed that the validators will be up, which means it will generally be more expensive for the validator to offer that kind of guarantee. And so you would just be paying more. And so this gives more flexibility for developers to create kind of different kinds of obligation systems that you want. Another example can be some obligations might be related to like IBC transactions, and some developers might not even care about IBC really that much. And so maybe those will be cheaper. And so it just in general gives more flexibility and optionality. In AWS, this will be more similar to, kind of different kinds of feature sets. So you can kind of specify what kind of network architectures and different like NICs and stuff like that you can add on to it. And, you can guarantee uptime and create kind of solutions that require with content distribution systems and things like that. So this would be what the obligation system is.
I'll pass it over to Dow Chemist. Dow, good to
Security
have you on,
source.
brother. If you wanna, say
Hey,
again.
what's up, guys? Sorry for joining late, but yeah, great conversation so far. Loving to hear about Saga. I'm kind of curious because it sounds like what you guys are doing is based on the metaphor AWS, right? You're kind of providing this blockchain as a service, and you're providing this modular choice that people can decide the consensus and execution layer. So, what type of developers seem to be gravitating towards your platform? Are they coming from the banking sector, more from the tech sector, fintech? Like, what kind of interest you get from people that want to build on top of your product?
Sorry, did I cut off?
Are you able to hear Dow Chemist, brother?
Yeah. I heard Dow Chemist. Sorry, I got a phone call and then I think my audio cut off for a second, so I wasn't sure what happened. But yeah, our Saga is a generalized platform, so anybody is able to kind of get these kinds of chainlets, regardless of what kind of applications they are. But our team is currently focused on gaming, and a lot of the traction have been in the kind of like the entertainment and gaming sectors. And the reason why this is specifically true is because our system is perfectly well designed for those who want lots and lots of really, really cheap transactions, and gaming specifically fits that very, very easily.
Cool, that makes a lot of sense. And do they have some knowledge of blockchain when they reach out to you, or you kind of have to do a lot of onboarding for them to understand the benefits of moving the infrastructure on chain?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Most of the time, the people we talk to, they're already familiar with blockchains, and they've kind of already taken I guess, drank the Kool-Aid a little bit. And so For those, it's pretty easy. On the other hand, I think there's a lot of like kind of traditional Web 2 developers who question why they need blockchain, and in those scenarios, it's more of a kind of a education exercise. But we tend to focus right now more, at least onboarding those who already know the benefits of it, and because convincing kind of these traditional web developers, game developers, it's a longer cycle, and so we're kind of doing those in parallel. But a lot of the builders right now obviously have converted and wanted to essentially test out these things.
And some of the bigger ones are in Asia, right? Like Come To Us in South Korea. Jin's South Korean, so he's got some connections over there.
Yeah. So Come To Us is a mobile game developer. They're really huge. They're actually public, and they've kind of pivoted their entire company direction to support Web3 and blockchains. And so we've been really great partners with them. They have a chain called Xpla. We're essentially working with them to start expanding their block space and offer their technologies to chainlets.
That's exciting. That's good to hear. I don't know if you guys check out DeFi Llama a lot, but they added this new feature where you get to see the number of daily active users per chain. And it's really sad, man. Ethereum is like 300,000 daily active users. Arbitrum is 200,000. The actually most popular ones are, I think, BSC with 2 millions, and then Tron, weirdly, with like 3 millions daily active users. But compared to like any video game, those numbers are so small that I think this is like one major route for adoption, like gaming, onboarding gamers, getting them used to NFTs and Web2 technology is probably the one of the path to mass adoption. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what we're trying to get to is a place where most users don't even know that they're interacting with a blockchain technology in the background. And in with the current infrastructure, it's not possible to do because the end users have to pay for gas, right? And so this is why structurally Saga is built the way it is. We can support a payment model that where end users are not paying in gas fees; they're just getting onboarded essentially as a as a customer of that developer, and really Saga is sort of invisible in the background.
Jin, I just went to sign up for a Web3 game the other day, and I went through the whole process, signed up, and at the very end, they're like, "Now you need like 100 of our coin just to get started." And I'm just like, "Dude, I'm just done. Like, I already did all your shit. Like, let me play your game." Where that's what you can get with Saga. Like, you get so much flexibility around how you can like onboard people. I think that's so valuable because gaming's all about just like, okay, let me do the 2 minutes to sign up for this thing, and hopefully it's enough fun where I come back tomorrow and play again.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like very equivalent to imagine if you went and downloaded Uber for the first time, right? To try to use Uber, and Amazon is like, no, you got to buy our token to pay for the service. It's a little ridiculous, and so from our perspective, it's a huge problem for any game developers trying to come into this space because the your user onboarding journey is terrible essentially in Web3. And so Saga, at least by allowing our developers to customize the way that users interact with the underlying infrastructure, we're opening that up and making that a lot easier for end users to use the platform, and hopefully that will get more mainstream adoption with use cases.
We'll pass it on over to Griko. Griko, what's up, man? Good to have you on here, brother.
Yeah, hey guys, super happy to be here and talking to you guys. Yeah, I just wanted to like follow on with your comment regarding gaming as being a kind of like open, like greenfield vertical. I'm building, subscription infrastructure on chain, and we started off with more like community and DAO tooling. But since that time, we are, fully immersed in the gaming, and that's where we kind of gotten the most kind of response, like good, good responses. and I think that's mainly because like gaming itself is in Web 2 certainly is becoming more monetized. They're just moving to like newer models of like subscriptions and just generally microtransactions, as well as like owning pieces like in CS:GO and so on. So yeah, this is the kind of thing I'm seeing on the cutting edge, where a lot of gaming companies are using MPC wallets, custodial wallets, where the end user, there's like we have one partner, they're on Android, and it's a blockchain game, but they don't call things NFTs. They just have in-game items, they have in-game currencies, and so on. So that kind of onboarding and on-ramping, I think, is kind of underrated. And a lot of the wider space on like crypto Twitter or Web3 in general isn't really kind of like understanding this huge shift that's happening all around the world. That especially like East Asia is like huge.
That's such a good point. It's like the gaming industry's already moved to like NFTs pretty much, but there's just no property rights. Like everything
Yeah.
acts as like an NFT. Like you buy this sick new skin, but it's not yours. It's like it's not your. Like you're a fiefdom. Like you're a serf on their land. But crypto says no. Like property rights for all.
Yeah, actually, so if you take a look at what kinds of things that just Web3 non-gaming applications have been, it's been kind of things that uh, game companies have implemented in their games for a very long time conceptually. So, for example, NFTs is something that the Saga account Drew mentioned, but also just kind of general trading marketplaces. That's one thing. Community building. So things like DAOs, right, is pretty one to one to things like clans and other kinds of community member management tools that have existed in game ecosystems. And so a lot of the reason why I think gaming is such a natural fit is like, people always say, "Hey, we haven't quite figured out what the use cases of crypto is." Like, look, we just said four things. Guess what? Those have been used in games for many, 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 almost decades, I would say. And so, the big challenge here at this point, in my mind, is that the infrastructure is just not there to support any kind of gaming application level of users. And so that's where we're trying to get to with Saga. Ultimately, that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, it's funny. We always talk about like, oh, we got to onboard the masses, like bring in millions of users. It's like, where is the infrastructure in place that can even take these people on? And what are they going to be doing that's going to attract them there just out of just their own need, not necessarily just getting rich off the newest like dog coin or like financial game. Like what's it? And I think gaming is just it just makes so much sense when you add it all together.
Yeah, that's right. And there, like crypto, I don't think Web3 is ready. I think I read recently people talking about how gas fees and infrastructure cost is no longer an issue, and I'm like, yeah, yes, in our bull market, I mean our bear market right now, but as soon as if a single big game onboards onto our current Web3 infrastructure, it's just going to destroy it. And so um, from our perspective, I don't think any of the solutions that the other Web3 infrastructure providers have been focusing on is really the answer to onboarding the millions and millions of users that are going to come from Web3 gaming. So
I feel like the only fee market that's a bull market right now is Bitcoin because of inscriptions. Like it's not Bitcoin transactions were cheap forever, like years, and now they're not cheap anymore.
yeah, as soon as you get a real use case, it becomes full again, right? So
Hey, I'm a boomer. I love my Bitcoin, bro.
yeah, so I think this is a good time to kind of dovetail into the conversation that Wabi and I were having right before we started this call, which is there's a lot of um, kind of what people call scaling solutions, and so in the ETH land, that the answer to scaling solutions has been rollups and layer twos. And so one thing to note though is layer twos and optimistic rollups, while great, and it does extend the Ethereum block space, it doesn't really fundamentally fix the underlying issue, um, which is that the economics is you have a limited set of block space for everyone to share, and you have to essentially compete for that block space. And by introducing these layer twos, you're not really fixing that. And so essentially the only thing you'll get is once you onboard kind of a new use case that hits that threshold, you just go back to the same problems that you've reached to in the past. And so fundamentally, I think Web3 needs re-architecting of the system to essentially be able to onboard all these users ultimately.
We'll go on over to Will's outlook. I think he wants to give his outlook on the presentation that you guys are applying to the conversation. So, Will's outlook. What's going on, brother? Good to have you on.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I think that's a really great take, that last comment you just made. I've consistently said that layer twos are not a resolution. Um, it's like they're all renting. Let's say you have a building, right? You have a bunch of people renting out spaces in that building. Each layer two is renting out a space in that building. And now that layer two is allowing so many people within their space. Well, that space that they have allocated to them can still fill up just like Ethereum space can fill up. So when you're looking at layer twos, the more activity that gets created on these layer twos, the more congested the mainnet comes, which would be the Ethereum, the layer one becomes, and the more congested everything becomes. Like the layer two is not it is not a resolution to the issue right now. It's the expansion of blockchain. Blockchain itself is very congestive. That's why it's problematic for gaming in a lot of ways. I think, in that issue is because it's just not as expansive. And I know that may not be what everybody wants to hear. I think technology is working its way to making blockchain more expensive. It's just not there yet. And Ethereum's old tech. There's a lot of these that are old tech. I know a lot of people probably invest in them. They probably like them. I'm not trying to like hurt anybody's feelings, but we need better advancement. I would say in the layer one space especially. Um, Go ahead if you had something to throw in there, Saga.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just going
yeah,
to say that Ethereum made some trade-offs to make it a very resistant system to like downtime and like nation state resistance. It's aiming for that use case of like the money of the world and global settlement layer, but it made a lot of trade-offs in the process. And I don't think the trade-offs are going to be worth it in the long run. Um, but in the short run, like there's no denying that Ethereum and the EVM are just a powerhouse, and they're like a monster to be reckoned with, and like they're not going away anytime soon. But there's no silver bullet in this scaling solution, and L2s and rollups are not it. But
yeah. So I think it's really interesting that what L2s and just kind of general rollups in general, there's two camps of technology that they're pursuing, right? So one is optimistic rollups, and the other one is ZK, right? So the funny thing about this is I'll go down each route and explain kind of how the, they will eventually evolve into. So if you take a look at optimistic, one way to do this is to launch a single sequencer. That's like most current solutions. That's not fully decentralized. And so the way that optimistic is going to go is they're going to come up with a way to create multiple sequencer networks that are coordinating with each other to make sure that everything is actually decentralized, which looks and feels like proof of stake. So essentially what layer twos are going to do is they're going to just recreate everything that exists in app chains already. And then now let's go down the ZK route, right? So ZK is an interesting way of kind of getting the same thing, but ZK is very, very expensive. And one of the things that you can do to make ZK computations a little bit better is to kind of decentralize the computation aspect of it. And so what you do is then you have multiple people kind of trying to solve the ZK algorithm in parallel. And guess what? That looks like proof of work, right? So in my opinion, all of these kind of scaling solutions that people are building, they're really just replicating what we had with proof of work and proof of stake, but in a slightly different technology. And what people will quickly find is that really there is only one answer, which is going to be the app chain route. And I think the opinion of Saga team, at least internally, is that why don't we just skip there and go there directly instead of kind of pretending to be something else and then ended up being there anyways. So that's
Yeah,
kind of like
exactly.
our
People
thought.
are just using jargon to create the same thing. Basically, juxtaposing media and words. Also, you said earlier something about how some people wouldn't mind the.
I can't
Yo,
really make
brother,
out what you're saying there, Ken.
the music from the gym is getting in the way, man.
Hold on. Can we hear now?
It's bad, bro. I think you're gonna have to go outside, brother.
Yeah, you got to go in the restroom or something. I could tell you when to jump in there though. He got excited when it starts talking. Good, great.
Yeah, I mean, again, just another follow up on that. I kind of agree. With some caveats, I don't think Ethereum as a layer one is a failure. I definitely think we had to kind of build that kind of low level infrastructure for things to work on top of. The app chain route is something it makes a lot of sense. For depending on the solution, the specific product that we're building, some make more sense than others. If you are building, a massive multiplayer game like World of Warcraft, then having your own chain definitely makes sense. And that being, but there has to be one key thing. It has to be kind of interruptible with other things, in order to drive money and in and out. So I think there are some caveats to be made with this whole kind of like conversation. I think app chains definitely make more sense, and more like specialized niches are kind of, we're kind of seeing that kind of inflow of app chain specifics, even layer twos and layer threes that are very specific in the tasks that they do. And they are building a like whole ecosystem around it. But one thing in my last kind of comment is, I've just kind of grown to be very chain agnostic. Even the way I kind of build, like don't really want to take risks at this point. I want to kind of lock in liquidity for my own project. But in the future, like everyone kind of thought Bitcoin was the one, hasn't really lived up to its name, and then now Ethereum is number one more or less. But again, like that has a lot of issues, like we kind of say. So yeah, just have to be realistic at the end of the day too.
Yeah, yeah,
Those are
100%.
valuable caveats. I think
Yeah,
those
yeah,
are.
definitely. I don't think I've ever considered, and Drew can kind of, I'm sure he feels the same way. I don't think Ethereum, of course, Ethereum is not a failure. I think all I'm saying is that the two architectures of Ethereum going from layer one down to layer threes, it looks kind of identical to the app chain world going down and up. And so, from our perspective, I think there are benefits to both that we can pull from on Saga's end, and that's what we've been kind of focusing on. So.
And he kind of noted that at the end when he said that the layer twos and layer threes will specialize, and it's really going to look like application specific. Yeah, everything converges back to something that looks like Tendermint and Cosmos and app chains, and it's different ways of slicing it and distributing the security, and yeah, but I really do appreciate those caveats because Ethereum was a smashing success. It really changed the world like no other, and their design decisions with how they did Casper like is not the best for like fast finality, but it's really good for liveness and is great against like nation state resistance, and that's what they're aiming for. And there's different projects in crypto, and there's no like single king to rule them all. But yeah, great caveats.
Okay, I'm outside. So Jen, maybe I misheard you earlier. What did you mean by downtown being accepted and tolerated under certain use cases? I could have misheard, but it sounds like you're saying some
Oh
people would
yeah, yeah.
accept latency just as like, I don't know, as a conditional thing, which makes sense. I mean, reliability
No, I
is
mean,
like key for infrastructure, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I think so. Imagine, for example, I'm a student, right, and I'm just like testing out this Web3 application that I want to test out. And I have it hosted, for example, on Saga, and I get my own chainlet. Like, does it really matter that sometimes at 3 a.m. it just stops working for 10 minutes and then it comes back. Not really. These are not production environments. Another example would be, let's say, like a developer within a team. So let's say, uh, let's use a very concrete example. Let's say DYDX. Here's a good example. They have an internal team who's building some stuff out and they want to test things out. So they spin up like a Saga instance. Their production Saga instance should probably be resilient to downtime. That makes a lot of sense. But their test instances, really, I don't think it really matters. And so what we can offer then is a realm essentially that relaxes that just a little bit and make it cheaper. So it depends on the use case, I would say.
So
But
something
I think the
like
There's
fact
an
that we can offer
kind of
both.
how
there's
like
there's
Apple has test flight. Is that kind of what you mean as an
Yep,
analogy?
that's correct. Yeah, so you can
Okay.
exactly. So we can make a realm that's like essentially just for testing purposes, and you do not need to pay essentially the full production price for that. You can get like a much cheaper version, and we can kind of figure out what kinds of realms are possible with Saga with this.
Oh, I got another one for you.
Okay, thank you.
You can I got another one. So you can like engineer into the system for some of your chainlets to die. And here's the example. You have an NFT mint coming up, right? And you're going to have a huge demand for a short period of time for your NFT mint, but afterwards it's not going to be as crazy, right? It's going to go back to a normal state. So there's nothing stopping you from spinning up three chainlets during the NFT mint, so you have excess capacity to handle a huge load, and then you spin down two of them and just leave one alive at the end. So like when you go into this like horizontally scalable world where you can spin up, spin down, upgrade, forget about chains, it really changes things. Yeah, you can have a test net version that's like what you consider a test net, but it's live, and then you could have your own live version. Like if a new uh, branch of code comes out for the Saga EVM, you could launch that as like a test environment, make sure it's all good to go, and then port over your assets. So like yeah, it just changes things when you go horizontal like this.
Yeah. So Drew is this. I think Drew, you're answering like a very slightly different question, but I like the direction that you're taking this,
Oh
and
yeah,
so
no, I went totally off track.
yes.
I just like
So this
going
is
crazy
this
stuff.
is a really cool example. So um this is what if you're familiar with like how AWS work, there's this concept called Lambda where essentially you don't get like a specific server from AWS. You kind of borrow a very short burst of compute and then you shut that down. And so in the long run, we want to get to a point where Saga can offer this as well. And what Drew mentioned is like a perfect example of this. And so he said three chainlets, but really we can kind of spin up, I would say, maybe 500 chainlets or something like that, and parallelize all of our users across those 500 chainlets. And then as soon as your mint is over, you don't really need it anymore. And so we can plan it such that it dies like within an hour or so after the mint or however long you want, essentially. And the cost that the developer will pay will be based on how much kind of like the integral of the area underneath of how many like chainlet instances that you did. And eventually we can get to a point where we can do this automatically, which would be really neat. So for example, a developer says, hey, I want this smart contract run and I want it automatically parallelizable across. And what you do is you just put a bunch of money in and say the maximum amount of chainlets that I would like is 100. Scale it based on use and just go essentially. And then the entire our Saga network will spin up these chains automatically, almost like a DDoS protection mechanism, and then hit the maximum. And then when traffic starts dying down, it collapses the state back down into a singular chain that the app chain owner owns essentially. And so these are kinds of really interesting ideas. This will work really well in gaming contexts where let's say you have a chain that gets spun up for every server that you have, or a game instance, for example, and then suddenly you have 10,000 more game players coming in because your game is really popular. Then you can code this in such that it parallelizes this automatically. And so this is a paradigm that developers are very used to in Web 2, that they demand this kind of functionality in Web 3. that just doesn't exist right now yet. And so this is what we're bringing
So
to the table.
like Minecraft or like MapleStory servers all having different levels of latency and features.
We're having that issue again there, Kim.
Yeah, or like imagine like you're playing Call of Duty and you can make like you can quickly make like one chain that supports an instance of a game. Maybe a good example would be like Fortnite. You join in with like 100 other players into one server. You temporarily launch a chain for that server, right? All this game activity happens, and then at the end, you don't really need to keep that chain running anymore because it's over, right? So you can kind of take the end state of that and collapse it back down into a different chain that manages all the different chain that launching. And so
is your chain ran off of the Saga token, I'm assuming, right? So
yeah, that's correct.
so the client would basically buy a bunch of Saga token. They would then go in and be like, okay, I want a maximum amount of 1,000 Saga. I want 100 blocks maximum, and then we'll follow that. And then so as new users come in, as more users come in, it just keeps on continuing to create space. And the only amount of Saga that would essentially be used is how much ever expansion they needed, right?
No,
So
it's more like the validators set a price for block space, and you just buy it, and the developer buys it in bulk. And on the front end, they can sell that however they want. Like you could literally just like watch a video and get access to block space, or like go through the sign up process and you get free access for 20 minutes. I mean, it just really switches it on its head. So the developer's buying it in bulk in Saga Coin on the front end. They can monetize that however they want.
Yeah, but it works very similarly to AWS. So like the way it works in AWS is like there's a price that's posted that says you pay, $30 and it will give you 2 cores for like X number of time period. It works exactly the same way in our system. So we have a set price essentially. As long as you pay that price, you will get a chainlet. And then the dynamic scaling is something that we can add later, where if we make this dynamic process of launching chains as easy, then we can put a router in front of it essentially, right? And dynamically scale this if we wanted to. But that requires a little bit more work than kind of our initial mainnet version.
Maybe I was missing the scaling portion. So the scaling portion is more based on users rather than space that or computing power that you're using or whatever, right? So it's more based on like a test net kind of sort of as far as
so here's an example, right? So the way that currently the way that Web3 developers think about their application is it's very serial and it's not very parallelized, right? So we want to change that mindset for developers to make it a little bit more parallel. And once you do that, there are these magical things you can do. So in Amazon, let's say you get 2 cores, right, worth of compute and you host your server today, and suddenly you start getting hammered more and more, right? You have written your server application such that if you just tell Amazon, hey, I would like 2 more cores, it just works better and it can support more people essentially. That's how programming in kind of Web 2 works.
That's what I was kind of saying. So maybe I didn't word it well, but like by expansion I meant like you have the availability to go to gain more if you need it, but it will scale you back down to your normal if you're not utilizing all that.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's important I think you should note that a single Saga chainlet is a powerful thing. Like, especially when you compare it to what everybody expects out of modern day world of like everyone sharing Ethereum. It's like you get your own Ethereum times 10. So like if you can max that out, congratulations, you can get a next one. But like I mean, for the level of users and applications today, I think most people would be fine with just one. But a lot of these things that we talk about are more for future, like when we're like dreaming big of like having a Call of Duty style game, like one chain. There will never be a single chain that can handle millions of users. So like if you come in from day one with a horizontal mindset, then you can really, you don't have to run into hurdles of how do you scale as you go. Is kind of what Jin's saying. But at the end of the day, like I said, 10 times Ethereum.
So how does that expansion work? Does it work through like sharding, or does it work through like just expanding the realm? I mean, like how does that?
So they're all the
Yeah,
same EVM chain, right? Like, they're all their own Ethereum. So on the back end, the developer would just have to like treat, like you can imagine it like World of Warcraft, where you would have like one whole world would have its own chain, and then you would have a second world that is its own chain. And then if you wanted to like do like cross chain stuff, we have IBC, and that's
yeah.
what
So
that. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
so like that's like one example, but the reason why sharding didn't work in Ethereum is Ethereum, the developers were thinking of in terms of like automatic sharding. How do we make it so
Mhm.
that there's this one giant layer one that automatically shards everything for you? And that's like a really hard problem. What we're doing is we're giving the developer a space in which they can shard their users themselves, right? So one example Drew mentioned is the World of Warcraft server scenario. So if that works with your model, then that's super easy to implement, right? So you just take a bunch of users, let's say 200 of them will go to this chainlet, another 200 will go to this chainlet, and it's like their accounts are always bound to that specific chainlet. So you just have to replicate that. And that's not really a technology solution. It's more of like how developers are thinking about scaling. And so from our perspective, we will make that possible by making it as easy as possible to launch your own app chain automatically. But once that happens, then horizontal scaling is possible across the use case based on the way that developers are thinking about it. Like here's another method, right? Let's say I'm an AMM, I'm Uniswap, and I'm like, oh crap, my traffic is too much. I think that's a little bit different than the Realms example, or so the World of Warcraft example that Drew mentioned is you can kind of split up each pair of assets into a different chainlet, a different chain, right? So now you can functionally shard your use cases that an ETH Uniswap pair is in one chain, and an ETH, let's say, Solana pair is in another chain, and you can functionally divide that based on kind of the use cases that you see. And so, from our perspective, as I said, it's a large portion of this is number one, making it as easy as possible to launch these chains so that it is horizontally scalable. And then number two, it's like that developer mindset, changing your application logic such that it scales across in this horizontal manner is ultimately the two things that are needed to make this happen.
Yeah, I like the World of Warcraft analogy because I've looked into that before just to kind of see why they implemented sharding, and it was the server stability and stuff like that. And I think that's still kind of continually going to be an issue for gaming on blockchain. Um, and that's why I was kind of asking. I don't know how to ask the question, I guess, properly for gaming, but as far as like server stability and stuff like that, I don't know if that would really be kind of in your guys' lane to answer, but I would be curious on that.
That's probably that's like the whole point of like blockchain, right? Is that the decentralized multi-node nature is what provides like the robustness and stability, and every Saga chainlet will inherit the full security and validator set of Saga. So in that sense, your chainlet, your World of Warcraft chain, will be alive as long as Saga's alive. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. And so, and the magic of all this is each of these chains that are launched by Saga is automatically interoperable in one another. And so, um, uh, for example, in the example of World of Warcraft, going back to that, World of Warcraft does something kind of clever where even in the same server, a lot of the sometimes the instances are sharded a little bit. So if you actually just like port into town, you won't see literally everybody in your server that's supposed to be in that town. If there's a lot of people, it will kind of like create these like sub instances. And with Saga, you can kind of do this, right? But as I said, then it requires the developer to think about how to scale using Saga. So like you can kind of spin up a chain temporarily, put some people's like state logic onto it, and then when you don't need it anymore, you collapse it back down into another chain, essentially, right? And so that's something that we will be able to support, but it's something that they need to incorporate into their actual gaming logic. And that's a change in mentality of how to program with Web3 ultimately.
wow, this conversation really went deep.
Dow, if you want to add anything, man, feel free to go ahead, brother.
Not a lot to add. I love to hear this conversation as well. To hear how you guys are mapping what we see on AWS. You mentioned Lambda and just the. I think the gist of the conversation, right, from what I got, right, my level was that there is indeed the sense that a lot of developers think in terms of a serial way, right? And what you guys are doing is providing this, I guess, modern cloud architecture thinking and microservices type of thinking to blockchain. So it's interesting to see how you would onboard as developers, right? Those that are used to like one way of thinking, into more maybe I would call it like a flexible way of thinking. But yeah, it was great listening to it. And I'm glad that we have that kind of thinking in that design space for blockchain development.
Yeah, my favorite analogy is that the early days of the internet, if you wanted to like start an internet company or an internet app or whatever, you'd have to like hire your own data engineers and get your own building and like host all the like computers and everything. But then Amazon AWS came along and they penciled it out and they're like, man, it still makes sense for us to build our own infrastructure. But what they didn't pencil in was just how much you can save by figuring out how to commoditize this resource. And that's what Amazon AWS knew before anyone else did. So the cost curves that everybody was penciling out blew up because Amazon AWS figured out how to commoditize it. So we're pretty much trying to do the same thing. And we're going to try to commoditize block space and open up flexibility for how users pay for it and how you onboard new users.
Yeah, and in the past, it was this creating this kind of horizontally scalable web infrastructure was incredibly difficult, right? Because of the process that Drew mentioned, you have to go and buy a building. For every like user that you get onboarded onto your system, you have to go and buy hardware manually, right? And once AWS came out with this cloud model, it really made a paradigm shift within the Web 2 industry on how to think about deploying infrastructure and how to make products on top of the internet that really accelerated. And we think that essentially the Web 3 world is kind of in that space right now where app chains are the equivalent of standing up your own infrastructure. It takes about a year to do. And the alternative is like you go to like, what was those things in the back, like GeoCities, right? You go to like a shared instance where you can't really scale with that ultimately. And imagine if Netflix tried to like host their video files and stream on top of like GeoCities, it wouldn't have worked, right? And so really for Netflix, the at the time their solution was they have to build their own data centers. And that's the equivalent of app chains today. And so Saga is trying to be that bridge ultimately from all the way from the beginning, make it as easy and cheap as possible to create these little instances of chains and give block space and commoditize it. And that's kind of our ultimate business model that we're pursuing. That's
Yeah,
a little bit different than most Web 3 projects.
I like Jin's point because Cosmos really was like we're standing on the shoulders of giants for us. We're using the Cosmos SDK. None of this is possible without without IBC, but we're just lowering that barrier to entry even further. Like, and that doesn't mean that a successful Saga project that kills it and is expanding and expanding, maybe they will build their own chain if they have that inclination. And that wouldn't be like a failure story for Saga. That'd be a success. Like, we think app chains are the future, and the more people that we can get using these blockchain applications that are actually useful and like snappy and cheap and all the things that you want out of like good technology, the better. So
Yeah, and I bet every single Web 2 project out there that has their own data center, every single one of them uses AWS still, even if they do have their own data center. And so we
90
will.
90% of the top 100 use AWS.
Yeah, but even those who make their own data center will use AWS on the side
Yep.
for testing, internal things, for scaling, and so uh, even if people hop out into their own app chain, from our perspective, they will still be, customers of Chainlets because of how flexible our scaling model is.
we haven't even really talked much about how we're partnered with like Avalanche and Polygon and how that whole stuff. But it kind of goes along those same lines. Like, we can even work with people that aren't like necessarily like launching chainlets per se, or at least not using the Saga validator set, I'll say. There's just different ways that we can use Web3.
Cool.
Well,
Really good questions.
this was a pretty great conversation. If anyone else on the panel has anything else to add, let me know. But
Yeah, I mean, I have one
go
more
ahead, Will.
thing. So, like, if you guys could just go into your technology stack that you guys were talking about earlier, what's the stack that you guys are using for yours, or what's the atypical stack that you, or I guess the biggest stack that you could create on Saga?
Yeah, so the first stack that we'll support is a Cosmos-based EVM chain, essentially. So EVM because it's the most used language out there, and Cosmos because we use essentially IBC and some of the Cosmos stack to facilitate some of these coordination you need to automatically launch these chainlets. After that, we'll start supporting other VM languages that are on Cosmos, which is pretty simple to do. And even in the Cosmos ecosystem, there are various efforts such as MoveVM and Solana VM and things like that. So those will be kind of easy to do. The next set of integrations will be the outside parties, so automating the launching of Polygon supernets and Avalanche subnets, which kind of then entails most of the app chain solutions out there. I think Binance sidechain is the only one that we haven't really quite penciled something, but that's something that we can kind of do post-launch after all these partnership integrations are completed. So that's our immediate kind of roadmap. But that being said, Cosmos will always be part of at least our chain because our mainnet is written in Cosmos. Because essentially we have one base layer chain, our mainnet, that spins up all these different chains. And so these chains that are spun up called chainlets can be whatever technology it wants, but the base layer chain is going to be written in Cosmos, and that's where our validator will be kind of, and all of our delegators will be staking to provide security on behalf of all these chainlets. So that's like kind of like the topological view of the technology.
Kim, go ahead, brother.
Okay. So especially so in the context of, blockchain, Web3, emerging technology as a whole, what is an unintended or unexpected use case you saw come out of people utilizing Saga and its various adjacents? And it might be too early for you to have a right answer for this, or not right answer, a developed answer for this one. But curious to see if you saw anything that came through that you didn't expect.
That we didn't expect. I think it's. I would say things that I
It
didn't.
could also be working as designed, which is perfectly valid as well.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that came out of this conversation thus far has been these ephemeral chains. It's not something that we really thought about before. We were like, hey, people would want chains, so it kind of makes sense to automate the launching of it. And then we started kind of brainstorming out into like, what are all these other kind of use cases you can use this for, which is then comes to this interesting concept of ephemeral chains. There's other ones as well. So for example, um, you can kind of imagine a scenario where you can launch essentially like a DA layer as a chainlet, and then have these like sub chainlets that are kind of roll ups onto your chainlets, and we can automate the launching of all of that. Um, and that makes it kind of easier for you to collapse your state back down because you have your main kind of data availability chain essentially, and you can scale your processes using these like roll ups into the future. And that's like something that we've been talking about as well. um, yeah, there's like a lot of surprising different topologies that can come out of this that really are not being discussed. One thing that's really nice about our system is that the validators of each of these little sub chainlets are identical. And so we can do some really cool optimizations that no one else really can. because we know for a fact, and everyone kind of shares the security of the underlying chain. And so there's a lot of simplifications to the Web3 architecture that you can make to the product to make it faster and much more performant and much more consistent, essentially, in user experience. So I don't know if Drew has another better example to
No, I just think in general that's been a long process, and our first idea for it was originally called Sagan, and got rebranded to Saga. It's just been a long evolution, and our first idea of what this project would be is not what it looks like today, and it just takes testing the market and seeing what the market wants and needs, and just exploring and evolving as the space evolves. And it's been a journey, but it's kind of just starting. So it's been a fun conversation, Wabi. Thanks for having us.
No problem, guys. It was great having you all. Thank you so much to the audience and to our speaker panel. If you guys are new to the spaces, feel free to follow us here at Because Bitcoin and also the guys over at Saga. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be hosting David Hunter on our YouTube channel, and we're going to be interviewing him about his background in Wall Street and also, pertaining his me about that, guys. I literally I got a phone call. I have to fix my air conditioner. All right,
LOL.
guys.
Okay, looks like we're done here.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
follow
So, sorry,
follow Saga.
sorry, guys. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I'm getting.
No, you're
Yeah,
good, Wabi.
I'm getting a phone call because I had an.
Twitter's so dumb.
Yeah.
Why did Elon fix this shit, bro? You're worth like $1 bajillion.
Yeah, I gotta fix my air conditioning unit. We had like a little storm here today, and it's so weird, dude. Like in one of the rooms in my condo, like there's no air conditioning. I mean, there's no light. Like the apartment has all the lights, but I think there's something wrong with like the circuit board or whatever. I'm guessing that's because of the storm. And then like the air conditioning unit, like I heard it like pop, and yeah, I just got a call from like maintenance to come see what's wrong. So that's why like I'm
All
cutting
right,
off.
sounds like you got some you got some bigger fish to fry there, bro.
Yeah.
So
yeah, fix your
Man,
infra, man.
thank you.
Fix your infrastructure.
Thank you. Yeah, we need to deploy the Miami infrastructure on the blockchain or something like that, man. I think the nodes might be like offline or something like that. I'm not sure.
You're getting
Yeah.
slashed. Yeah, all your validators are double signing.
Yeah, I gotta add more. I gotta add more LP to my collateral. I gotta add more liquidity to my collateral. I don't wanna be margin called, right? I don't wanna get liquidated. But
hey, thanks for all the speakers in the crowd. You guys asked great questions. It was fun,
Yeah,
engaging. Had a great
this is
time with
very
y'all. It was
interactive.
sweet.
I loved it.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
sweet.
great. Thanks for the good
Yeah,
questions.
man. It's been a pleasure having you guys on. I remember I hosted Rebecca in January, and then I hosted you guys as a collective, like you and Drew, sometime in February. And then I know you guys had your marketing campaign and conferences and all that stuff throughout March and April. So yeah, it's good to catch up with you guys, and I'm sure we'll reconnect over the summertime. So we can have you guys probably on our YouTube channel once you guys like deploy on mainnet, and we can we can show the audience some of like the UIX and all that stuff that's built on top of Saga. So appreciate you guys so much. If you guys are new to the spaces, feel free to follow us here Because Bitcoin and turn on bell notifs to keep up with all of our shows. See you guys tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time on our YouTube. Take care. God bless you. Thank you so much, Jen and Drew and the panel. Thank you guys. Bye bye.
Peace.